And what the omni-contraction you're describing is you get the increased benefits of all three types of contraction. You get the peak effect of the concentric, you get the strength and muscle damage effects of the eccentric, and you get the localized strength effect of the isometric. It's a good way to train if you can handle it. I'm sure it's not an easy way.
Hello and welcome. I am Coach Castle, a certified biomechanics expert, nutritionalist, and efficiency coach. Subscribe to this channel to learn the most efficient ways to maximize your muscle growth and recovery, enhance your body, and advance your mind, all using the latest science. Welcome to Castle's Corner.
Now, going back to your days back doing high intensity training, did you ever do any of the, let's say, advanced training techniques, or did you do the rest pause? Did you do the well, let's talk about rest pause then to start with. Any story times for that?
Rest pause, of course, that was a favorite of mine, where basically you would do your reps, a certain number of reps, and then you would kind of like rest without releasing the weight. You rest a couple of seconds, and then you continue set. You do that as many as maybe 3 or 4 times during the set. And the idea is that it works the muscle beyond that little bit of rest, just a couple of seconds allows partial restoration of the ATP in muscle, allowing you to continue the set. The idea was you're working the muscle again, almost like beyond failure. You're working the muscle to the nth degree, so you'd get more muscle gains. Now, the medical literature on that is kind of paradoxical. Some studies show that it really works. Other studies show that it doesn't. So I used it. I found it did work. My guess is my hypothesis. I think it would work better if you have a little bit of training experience under your belt. I don't think it will be effective for somebody who's just starting out on a high intensity. They should wait until they have a little more strength built up, more training experience, and then they can instill a rest pause. I would avoid it as a beginner.
I would definitely agree. I mean, I want to stress, I would say that these are all advanced techniques you should be doing after you're very comfortable with movements and you're very secure with everything you're doing. Then you can try these out.
Exactly right. Another thing that Mike liked to do, which is part of high intensity or any type of training really, is forced reps. Also gets a lot of flack because people say, there's a way of doing it right and a way of doing it wrong. I've seen people do forced reps. Forced reps basically involves where you've, let's say, trained to failure practically or close to it, and you can't get another rep, and your training partner just helps you get the weight up, maybe a couple of additional reps. It's again, the idea is you're training the muscle beyond exhaustion. You're hitting the maximum number of muscle fibers. The problem with that is you got to get somebody who knows how to apply the amount of resistance. I've seen people giving force reps where they're literally lifting the weight for the guy. The guy's not doing anything.
No, I would say I have a perspective on this. I want to know your thoughts on it. So my perspective is I'm not actually a fan of force reps for the positive or the concentric of it. I am a fan just getting it up for the person and then forcing them to do the eccentric, because typically people burn out their concentric before their eccentric.
Yeah.
So I think that makes perfect sense.
That's actually that's the best way to do it.
But the reason I would say, but the reason I would say about the positive, why I don't think that has effect, is because if the muscle has failed, basically what you're doing is a drop set. And when you're doing a drop set, all you're doing is reducing the load. So if you're reducing the load by assisting the person, all you're doing is, again, reducing the load. However, if you give them the full load or even additional load, I mean, we'll probably chat about that in a second, or even additional load on the way down, that is, I think, highly productive.
Right. Well, also, that's a kind of controversy also in muscle science, because for years they believe that the eccentric or negative contraction, Arthur Jones said this too, that's the part of a muscle contraction that produces the most muscle hypertrophy and most muscle strength gains, because it's more damaging to the muscle fibers. And by, again, the more damage, the greater the application or involvement of those muscle satellite cells I talk about, which causes increased muscle growth. So it would make sense to emphasize. Other more recent studies say that the concentric or the raising, some call it positive reps, of the weight produces just as much muscle mass as the eccentric. My experience has been my personal experience has been the eccentric contraction is much, much more productive in terms of increased strength. And also, I found that through the years, if I really emphasize the eccentric, I got a lot stronger. And this is something I see in the gyms where I go to. practically no one, I'm talking nobody, zero does emphasize it. They go like this, like this, no eccentric movement at all.
And no control either, for that matter. They don't know what the hell control is.
I mean, if you train that way, I'm not going to say you're not going to make any progress, but you're losing 90% of the benefit of an exercise. It's a stupid way. Just, like Arthur Jones said, take 4 seconds to lift the weight, meaning contraction, concentric, 4 seconds to lower it, eccentric. In fact, for a while on his Nautilus machines, he was having guys do only eccentric only exercises. He designed levers which would lift the weight and let you lower it yourself. He was such a strong believer in eccentric or negative reps, as he called it.
So I'm sorry, this kind of leads into the next one, I would think, though, is the infitonic training. But you remember that one?
That one I'm not familiar. Just describe it to me, and I'll tell you if I recognize it.
It's just basically partner assisted, basically, but with additional eccentric force.
Okay, well, yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, Mike and Ray did that when they trained together.
Dorian was a big component of that, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Yes.
Yeah. Who was Dorian's training partner? I can't recall, but he was amazing.
He had several of them. There was another black guy who used to compete. Can't remember his name, but he had this crazy looking tricep muscle. Everybody said that it was what do they call that stuff where they inject stuff in the muscle?
Synthol.
Yeah.
Because
he had this freaky tricep that almost came to a point. I think his name was Ernie. I can't remember his last name, something like that. But that was one of his training. He had several, training.
Well, who's the guy from Blood and Guts?
I'm not sure who that guy was.
But it doesn't matter. He was an amazing training partner. When I saw you see that Blood and Guts, he's just outstanding. I wish I could find somebody like that to train with me. It's impossible nowadays.
Yeah.
What do you think about the omni-contraction training? Do you remember that one?
Remind me again. What was that?
Oh, sorry. So omni-contraction is one that I'm a fan of. It's actually the only time I'm a fan of doing any form of static hold. Basically, you raise the weight and then at 3 different portions, basically throughout the range of movement of lowering the weight. You pause and actually try to resist with an upward force for 2 to 3 seconds for each basically pause in the range of motion.
I think
his theory basically being with the omni-contraction that you'd be training the concentric perfectly, the eccentric very slowly, as well as getting isometric contractions throughout the range of motion, making it omni-contraction.
Yeah, in other words, he's saying you're getting all 3 muscle contractions at once. That makes sense. The thing about isometric contractions that they found, isometric is basically a static contraction in one position. When you do only isometric contractions, you only gain strength in that one position. In other words,
I don't like them.
In other words, to get full, you'd have to get, let's say, a full bicep effect. You'd have to do an isometric in the starting position, middle position, and top position, right?
Well, not only that, you'd have to do it in something like 40 or 50 different positions.
Right.
Like throughout there.
Right. Well, that's also the problem with electromyostimulation. It's almost like an isometric contraction, meaning that it can actually maximally stimulate a muscle even beyond your voluntary capacity. But what they found, again, just like isometric, it only stimulates strength in the position of the lever or where your arm or leg is. Only there. It won't here. Only here where the electrodes. It won't stimulate overall. For that, you have to have the full range of motion. And what the omni-contraction you're describing is you get the increased benefits of all 3 types of contraction. You get the peak effect of the concentric, you get the strength and muscle damage effects of the eccentric, and you get the localized strength effect of the isometric. It's a good way to train if you can handle it. I'm sure it's not an easy way to train.
I was just about to say, I myself would, just to anybody listening this, I would advocate literally using this once a training session for one body part, one set. It is the most brutal thing I know. It's the most brutal way I know of how to train, honestly.
Right.